All right, let's talk Georgia Bulldogs fresh off a big time victory, admittedly after a slow start in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. But the Bulldogs are not resting on their laurels. They just made a really nice move that should help out the future of the program, as well as they look to head their way towards another national title. Good news all around at Georgia. I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, this Georgia team, obviously a disappointing loss earlier this season. Alabama has not hampered them. They've been making a really great run despite a bunch of turnovers at the quarterback position. If you remove those, I know you really can't, but if you just look at the line of scrimmage and how they're executing, they're clearly, in my opinion, one of the more dominant teams in college football. And other players, and specifically prospects and recruits, are noticing that as well. They're making big flip after big flip, and this latest report is just another example of that. Let's pull it up. This is from SI.com. The Georgia Bulldogs have continued to build their 2025 recruiting class with the National Signing Day closing in. Remember, early signing day, it's earlier than it is, right? Remember, it's, I think, December, middle of December sometime. And they just added a massive commitment to the group. Wide receiver CJ Wiley has announced his commitment to Georgia on Wednesday evening. This comes after his decommitment to Florida State not too long ago. Wiley decommitted from Florida State at the end of October and is now committed to the Bulldogs. Wiley had Georgia in the final mix of recruitment when he announced his pledge to Florida State, and now Georgia has to hold on the recruitment with early National Signing Day quickly closing in. This is the second year in a row that Georgia has flipped one of Florida State's premier commits late in the cycle. Last year was safety KJ Bolden, who had a nice little game recently against Florida. He's coming along, flipping to Georgia on early National Signing Day. This is just momentum. This is just energy, right? Obviously, Georgia's in a position to win a national title this year. But when you want to be a dynasty, which Georgia has been and looks like they will continue to be, you've got to maintain your recruiting edge. And this latest move is a great example of just that. Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on all of this. But first, Bulldogs fans in the comment section below, massive SEC matchup this weekend. Absolutely massive. It's going to be a fun one. We got Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. We got Kirby Smart in Georgia. Obviously, Georgia handled them with ease last year. Will this year be different? Let us know, comment section below, what you think the final score will be. Ole Miss, Georgia. Want to hear from you guys. Hit us up in the comments. But Mize, what are your thoughts on this latest news out of Athens?
Yeah, Nick, I think this is a big move for Georgia. Obviously, back-to-back years, kind of getting some of the better players out of Florida State to be able to flip back to Georgia. I think that's really big for them going forward. Probably that aspect a little more last year than it is this year. This year, it's kind of like picking on your younger brother. Florida State hasn't really done too much to talk about, so not too much of an ask to get CJ Wiley from them. But I think the quality of players they're grabbing here is great, and where they're from is even more important. Because when you lose a guy that's from your own backyard, Alpharetta, Georgia, in your home state, to a state like Florida, who also has a lot of great talent, a lot of great recruits there as well, that hurts. You know, one of the top 85 plus players in the nation, one of the top 13 wide receivers in the country. It stinks to lose a guy like that out of your own home state, but whenever you're able to use your resources, use your recruitment, the momentum you speak of, the lack of momentum for Florida State, and come back and pull this guy back into your sphere, that feels really, really good. And that is absolutely the case here with CJ Wiley, excuse me. This was a big move because, like you said, Georgia, Florida State, right there at the end of this last recruiting cycle, they were neck and neck, but he was able to go to Florida State. Now, able to pull him back into the fold at Georgia. I just think this shows Kirby Smart. He's not losing sight. He's not getting too big headed about like who's going where. Not saying, hey, we're the number one team in the country. We're going to just go find somebody else. He's still winning those in state battles. And I think that shows his recruiting is still sound. His base is still sound. And there isn't going to be any massive holes in this team going forward. Because if you start locally and recruit your base, you can never go wrong. Then you branch out. We talk about it all the time. Go regionally, go nationally. I just think this shows he's staying to his base. He's staying local and making sure he gets all of his local guys and then branching out. Really sound strategy by Kirby Smart.
You know, if you look at the top three football programs in college football over the last 20 years or so, right, there's obviously Alabama, Georgia, and then Clemson, right? They've fallen off a little recently, but they obviously, for a while, they were winning a lot of titles, making a lot of noise. All three programs dominating the recruiting game. A little more Georgia recently than Clemson. But when you look at one of the things both those programs were really good at, that's kind of not talked about, is they took advantage of weakness in nearby programs, right? Look at Alabama. The rise of Nick Saban, except for a couple years, like with Cam Newton, for example, directly aligned with the fall of Auburn, right? Obviously, Alabama is a very deeply talented state in terms of college football talent, in terms of high school players going to college football. Auburn falls a little bit. Nick Saban's there to pounce. How about Clemson, right? Tennessee falls a little bit. Tennessee's a team that really recruits North Georgia, as you Bulldogs fans know, but they also recruit the Carolinas and, of course, the state of Tennessee as well. They fall for a number of years. What do you know? Clemson rises, right? And we've seen that happen with Georgia actually recently. We've seen Clemson dip. Georgia's done a great job recruiting also ever since then to get some of the guys that Clemson formerly went after. But the great programs, the smart programs, they look for weaknesses in regional rivals and they go after them with every single opportunity because that is one of the that's one of the easier things to do. It sounds really hard to do, but it's actually so easy because you got a talented player and he wants to go to a program. It's a local guy. This kid's, maybe wanted to go play for Florida State. Maybe they offered him a lot NIL or whatever. And he looks at Florida State and he's like, all right, they stink. It's very easy for a good program to go like, hey, we don't stink. Obviously, we're good. And the kid's like, oh, fair enough. I commit. Right? It is the sales job is easy. It speaks for itself. You just have to find those players and go get them. That's what Nick Saban did at Alabama. That's what Dabo Swinney did for a number of years at Clemson. Kirby Smart has followed that same model the past half decade or so at Athens. It will continue for Georgia going forward. This is why I keep saying and I've said it, I feel like for a couple of years now, this run Georgia's on of being one of the top 5 programs in the country, it's not going away, folks, unless something redunculous happens, right? This Georgia Bulldogs program with this approach, they're going to be good. They're going to be competing for national titles, deep playoff runs in 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028, right? We'll be already talking about another election year before we even consider Georgia falling off the map. That's how good they are with Kirby Smart, and it's all because they recognize weaknesses like Saban did, like Swinney did, and they take advantage of them. I love this strategy out of Georgia.